Okay, so have your books out ready, pens and all the rest of it, and just write this into your book, or if you can write this on your iPad, that's fine as well. I'm not sure if you can watch a video and write at the same time. Alright, so let's do a quick quiz. Excuse me. Sorry. Alright, so first of all, you might need to go through your book and find out what the area of a circle was. We did that about a week ago. And for those of you who can't remember, it's pi times radius squared. I forgot a calculator. Let's get me that one. There we go. Beautiful. Alright, so recapping, how do I work out the area of this lovely circle? Well, I go area equals pi times, now the radius, if you remember, is halfway, isn't it? And they've given us, nice easy one there, at 7. Now the formula is telling me to square it, so I'm going to put a little squared up there. Alright, so now I'm going to use my calculator, which doesn't seem to, there we go, want to work, there we go. I'm going to go shift or second function and pi, which is along the bottom in the middle of my calculator. I should get a little pi symbol up, times 7, and then I'm going to hit the x squared key, and I get 49 pi, and if I press the F to D or the S to D key, and let's do it to, I'll do the whole thing first, I get 153, so that you can see the same, 93804, and normally we round that up, don't we, to something, and I'm going to suggest 1 decimal place. So to 1 decimal place means I keep the 9, but I get rid of the 3, but I look at the 3, don't I, and apply my rounding rules. So if it's a 3, that means I don't have to round the 9 up. So I write a 9. Now go back to your units, you'll notice there's centimetres, and since we're doing area, we put a squared on our units. That tells us straight away that our answer is an area answer. Okay, so if you were a bit confused about that. Alright, next we have another shape. So let's have a look at B. Hopefully you notice it's a semicircle, or it's half a circle. So we're going to do the same formula. Okay, pi r squared. So we're going to pretend we're finding a full circle. Okay, so we need r squared, don't we? Do we have the radius? Remember, the radius is only halfway. So what do I have to do to 20 to only work out halfway? Because 20 is all the way across. Hopefully you said, well, half 20, miss, and you'll get 10. Excellent work. Now remember, this formula is r squared, so I must put 10 squared. Now I'm just going to draw this in. That's for a full circle. Can some of you tell me, what do I need to do to that answer to get a semicircle answer? So hopefully you're going to tell me, well, when you finally get your answer, miss, you're going to halve it, or divide by 2, same thing. So let's do pi times 10 squared, pi, shift or second function, times 10 to the power of x, which is in the middle of the very bottom row next to the answer key, and then times 10 squared equals, now I get 100 pi, which if I press my S to D key or F to D key, I get 314. I'm going to do it to 3 decimal places this time, because that's about all I've got room for. Now that's for a full circle, right? I only want half a circle. So I have to halve that, don't I? Don't like those equals. Let's do them again. So now I'm going to keep that 314 on my screen and just press divided by 2. Press the S to D key because it keeps coming up with silly 50 pi, and I get 157. Now I'm going to do this. It says 0, 7, 9, 6. So let's see, how many decimal places should I do this one? I'm running out a bit of room here. Okay, so this one I'm going to do to 2 decimal places, just to practice. So that means I keep the 1, the 5, and the 7. I'm going to keep 2 decimal places, but not the 9. So I have to look at the 9 to figure out, do I round the 7 up or not? Hopefully you said, yes, miss, because it's a 9. So that means I add 1 to the 7 and I get an 8. Look at your units. It's millimetres. So let's write our units as millimetres and squared. We're not squaring anything. We're just writing squared because we know, therefore, it's an area answer. Beautiful. All right, what happens when you get a sector? Let's see if you can remember how to do a sector. So for a sector, you had to work out the fraction of the sector that you have, and then you're going to multiply that by good old pi r squared, the area of a circle, aren't you? Okay, so we're just using that again. So the first thing I need to know is what's the angle they've given me, and I'm going to put that where the theta goes. So in this case, I've been given a sector with an angle of 70 degrees. Now, if I put that into my calculator, 70 fraction key, or fraction key then 70, I wrote down 360. It doesn't really reduce to much except for 7 over 36, which you probably could have done just by crossing off the zeros. Now that's okay, but since we're using a calculator, let's do this all in one go, shall we? So my next step is to multiply by pi r squared. Hopefully you noticed that from the middle of the circle to the outside, that's the radius. So our radius equals 5. So on my calculator, I'm going to do 70 over 360 times pi times 5, and I forgot the square, didn't I? Don't forget to square it because we're finding the area. So let's do that. Fraction key for me, 70 over 360. You didn't have to press the fraction key first. I'm going to arrow across, then press times. Second function, pi, down near the answer key, down the bottom there, times 5, and then I'm going to hit the squared. That gives me, got to press my F to D key, that gives me 15.27. Now I'm going to do this one to 2 decimal places. Now after the 27 it was a 1. So if that's a 1 there, okay, I'm going to cross that off if I'm doing it to 2 decimal places. Do I have to round the 7 up? Hopefully you said no. Don't forget centimetres squared because it was 5 centimetres originally. Alright, next one. Area of a rectangle. Write that in if you think you know what it is. There are many different forms of the area of a rectangle. I don't really mind which one you use as long as you get the right answer, okay? So you could use length times breadth. You could use length times width. You could use, some people like to use base times height because they use that a little bit later. I really don't mind as long as you use one of those. So hopefully you notice this one's your length. This one is your breadth or your width. Okay, and all we have to do is multiply those two numbers together. So let's do it. Area equals, length is 12 times breadth is 4. 4 12s, hopefully you can do that in your head or on your calculator, and it's 48. Now this is in meters, and don't forget it's an area answer, so I'm going to write my answer as 48 meters squared. Alright, next one, area of a square. Now you could do area of a square exactly the same way as area of a rectangle, but it is slightly different if you wish to know the different one. And it's basically the length of one side squared, alright? Or sometimes they write side squared. Now the reason why they say that is if one side is 3 and it's a square, well, we know all sides of a square are the same length, don't we? So you could just do that one times that one, which is 3 times 3. And if you remember, 3 times 3 can also be written as 3 squared, can't it? But either way, what's 3 times 3? Hopefully you said 9. Don't forget your units, millimeters, and it's an area answer, so I'm going to put a squared. So that's where the squared comes from, just in case you're wondering. If you just want to do length times breadth, that's still fine with me. Alright, hopefully we know those. Right, let's go over triangle. This was a little while ago. Now if you did it according to the lady on the video, she said that it was base times height divided by 2, I believe. Now if you prefer half times the base times the height, that's okay too. Alright? Really doesn't make any difference. Now the thing you have to remember with this one, just in case you didn't pick it up, the base and the height have to be at right angles to one another. No matter what kind of triangle, here's 2 different ones, you must always remember the base has to be horizontal, the height has to be vertical. Okay? You can't use a side that's on an angle, is what I'm trying to say. So let's have a go at this one. So if you want to do it the same way as the lady did on the video, base times height is 8 times 9, because if you remember, that would be the same as if doing a rectangle, but we know a triangle is only half of a rectangle, don't we? So we halve that answer. 9 times 8, I'm going to use my calculator, is 72. And half of 72, divide that by 2 on my calculator, and I get 36. So my answer is 36 centimeters. And don't forget, it's an area answer, so I'm putting a squared so I know it's an area answer. Alright, so this one, we're using the same thing. Now, I've given you extra sides in this one because I wanted to see if you could see the trick. Alright, now remember I said the base should be, doesn't automatically have to be, but it should be horizontal, so hopefully you noticed. This is the base. Now the height has to be vertical at right angles, so in this case it does and will be vertical. And the dead giveaway, hopefully, will be the little right angle right there. So they're the only two sides that we should be using when we're trying to find our area of a triangle. So area equals 10 is the base, height is 12, and then I'm going to divide that by 2 because if I put it together, I know that it's a triangle is half a rectangle. So on my calculator, 10 times 12, press equals, I get 120. Divide that by 2, you might know this in your head. That answer is 60. Now it's in centimeters, but it's an area answer, so I'm going to write centimeters squared. Alright, so this one gets tricky. Here you're going to go, oh, I've put extra numbers in on purpose. Okay, now the base and the height have to be at right angles. So the first thing you need to look for is that lovely right angle symbol. Okay, now the height does not always have to be a side of the triangle. Now this one is a tricky one. This one here is horizontal, so it's the base. Okay, but the height on this particular triangle is actually on the outside of the triangle, and that is allowed. Okay, doesn't have to be a side of the triangle. So our height is actually the 2. This one's a bit trickier, I know. Okay, so here we go. Half times the base, 2.7, times the height was 2. Use our calculator. Sorry, I wrote that out differently, didn't I? Normally we've been doing 2.7 times 2 and then divided by 2. Sorry about that. You could have done the other way too if you wanted. There's no problems there. So let's do the top first. 2.7 times 2, and then I'm going to divide that by 2. My calculator is giving me 27 over 10, which is annoying, so I'm going to press S to D or F to D, and that gives me 2.7 as my answer. Now remember, this one's in meters, so I'm going to write units, meters squared. Beautiful. Alright, let's try parallelogram. Now do you remember parallelogram? Now here's a picture of a parallelogram for you. I just want to go over it. Here's a parallelogram. Now what the lady said to do was to take this triangle and shove it on the end here. Now if you did that, this one kind of rubs out. And what do we get? Oh, look at that. Does that look like a rectangle? Let me see. If I go over it in green, that looks like a rectangle to me. So we're going to, let me get rid of this for a minute. We're going to do this. That's the base. And we're going to multiply it by this. Because that's what we normally do, don't we? In a rectangle, that's what we did up here. Yeah, that one. Length times breadth, or length times width. So we've just changed our parallelogram into a little rectangle. Okay, so here's my base, and here's my height. Now why do we say base? Base times height is the formula. Why do we say base? Because it really is this side, okay? The base of the parallelogram, and the height, as just with a triangle, it should be at right angles to the base. Okay, so nice and easy. It's just like a rectangle. Bottom 7 times the vertical height 2. What's 2 times 7? You can do that one in your head. 14. My units are meters, so my answer is meters squared. Okay, now rhombus and kite were a little bit harder, so let's go over these. So the way that the gentleman, if you got to watch it in the video, was he cut it in half. So he cut it in half and he made it into these two triangles. So you should notice in this triangle, right, that goes straight across. Do you notice that's 10 all the way across? So I'm going to put that in. That's 10 there. So that means that one's 10 there as well. Now I just said I need the height, don't I? The vertical height. Right? Now here, I'll do this one in blue. All of this is 4. But I only want halfway. What's half of 4? Hopefully you said, it's 2, miss. So you are correct. It is 2. So how do we do our area of a triangle? We go BH over 2, don't we? And then this one, BH over 2. So let's have a look. We go the base of 10 times the height of 2, and we halve it. Now our second triangle is just exactly the same, isn't it? A base of 10 times by 2, and we halve it. So let's see what we get. 2 times 10 is 20. Half of 20 is 10. 2 times 10 is 20. Half of 20 is 10. We add those together and we should get an answer of 20. So that's the long way if you want to split it up into two triangles, and that's okay to do it like that. But what I want to show you is what have we actually done in our working. So you'll notice we use the 10, yes? Right, now in a rhombus, the 10, if it goes from one corner to the other, do you know what that's called? Hopefully you said it's a diagonal. So we've actually done one diagonal, okay, and we've multiplied it, if I put these together, by the other diagonal. But what did I do to that 2? What did I do to that 4 to make it 2? Hopefully you said, well, you halved it, miss. And that's exactly what I did. So I went one diagonal times by the half of the other diagonal. Okay? Diagonal times a half. So that's the quick way. So let's just double check that. So over here, my diagonals are 10 and 4. So if I come over here, if I go 10 times 4, what do I get? Hopefully you said 40. And then I halve that. What's half of 40? Well, it's 20, miss. What do you notice there? Did we get 20? Oopsies. For both answers? Hopefully you said yes. Now, if you're not doing really well with the diagonal times a half, that's okay. You can still split it up into two triangles. All right? Obviously, the more working out you have to do, the more problematic it might be a little bit later. Now, just to show you, instead of using the words diagonal, sometimes they use that in America. They say D1 and D2. What we use in Australia, however, is we call, so let me do a rhombus again. We'll call this diagonal X. And we'll call this diagonal Y. It doesn't matter if you swap them over. So instead of writing the words diagonal, we use X and Y. So the formula that we actually use is half of X times the Y, okay? Where the X and Y are the diagonals. So X and Y equal the diagonals. All right? So I'll just put that working out over here. So that means we'd go half times. So one diagonal is 10. The other one, you'll remember, is 4. So half of 10 is 5. 5 times 4 is 20. Remember, only halve one of the numbers. We only halved one of the diagonals, didn't we? Okay, and if you do it on your calculator, half times 10 times 4, you can never go wrong. Okay, now I did a kite because it's actually the same thing. Notice it's got 2 diagonals. You can do the same thing over here. You can cut the shape in half. So you'll find that I'm going to use this as the base, that's 16. This is the base, that's 16. Make that a bit smaller. Okay, and this time the height is half of the 8. Now that 8 goes all the way across, but if I cut my triangles in half, what's half of 8? Hopefully you said 4. So that means this height here is 4 and this height here is 4. So we use our knowledge of triangles, and this one's going to be base times height, 16 times 4 over 2, and this one's going to be base times height, 16 times 4 over 2. I'm going to do those on my calculator. 16 times 4, oh, calculator's gone off. 16 times 4 equals, divided by 2, 32. And then, of course, we add those two together because it's 2 triangles and we are adding them together, and I get an answer of 64. Now, a kite, because it has diagonals, you can use this formula with it as well. The half xy means the same thing. So you could also have gone half times one diagonal 16 times the other diagonal 8. Now this time it goes all the way across. So using your calculator, half times 16 is 8, and 8 times 8 is 64. It's in meters, so I write meters squared. So either way, we get the same answer of 64, don't we? Okay. Now, trapezium we did the other day. All right, and this one was a bit tricky, and the lady also did it on the video. All right, so what she did on the video was she cut the trapezium into 2 triangles, if you remember, like this. Okay? Now what you have to remember, however, is each of the parallel sides, so each of the train tracks, they become the base of the triangle. So that's the base and that's the base. So automatically, hopefully you can see that this 6 here is the height of each triangle, because we learnt before that the base and the height of a triangle must be at right angles. So this triangle would be a half. Actually, I'll go back and do the way that she showed us. Hey, it's BH over 2, isn't it? So the base is 10 times the height is 6, and then we put that over 2. Let's do that while we're here. 10 times 6 is 60. 60 divided by 2 is 30. And this one, base times height, is 8 times 6 this time, over 2. 6 8s are 48. 48 divided by 2. 48 divided by 2, trusty calculator, is 24. Okay, and then we would obviously add those together. 30 plus 24 equals 54. Now, if you want to do it that way, that's okay. But the shortcut method, if you remember, was this. Now, we have to have a look and see what are we doing that's similar in all of this. So hopefully you noticed we're dividing by 2 both times. Yes? Okay. So I'm going to put that in our formula. We are dividing by 2. What's the other thing we're also doing? We're multiplying both of them by 6. Okay, and what's 6 represent again? That's the height. So we are multiplying by h, the height. Now, the only thing that's different is this, the 10 and the 8. Now, the trick here is to have a look and see what we do over here. So with the 10 and then the 8, we're actually going to add those together. We're going to do the backwards distributive law, and we're going to add those together. Now, in trapeziums, we call the parallel sides A and B. Alright, we're going to do algebra soon. Hopefully it'll make a little bit more sense. Now, if you don't like this formula, then please feel free to keep splitting up into two triangles like that, okay? But you've got to make sure you go across ways. So if you use that formula up there, I'll do it in a different colour. You're going to go A plus B, so that's the 10 plus the 8. So the rule is add parallel sides. Okay, then we're going to multiply by the height. So we're going to multiply by the height, then times by the height. And then what's the last thing we do? Then we divide by 2. So then you divide by 2. So let's do that on a calculator. 10 plus 8, do it in brackets, or do it first and press equals. Then times that by 6, I get 108. And then I'm going to divide that by 2. That gives me 54 centimeters is our answer. So centimeters squared. So no matter how you do it, you get 54 centimeters squared. Alright, let's try this one. Oh, this one's in kilometers. Now I'm going to do it both ways. I'll try the formula first, because you have to get used to it. Alright, so the formula is, now the formula is written in lots of different ways, but this way is the one we're going to stick with for now. A plus B times the height, divide by 2. Sometimes they write it like this. H half the height, and then A plus B. They actually all mean the same thing, and you're going to learn algebra soon, and you're going to figure out that it all means the same thing. So let's stick with our formula at the moment. Now the A and the B you need to know are the parallel sides. So the first thing we need to do is we need to add the parallel sides. 14 plus 20 times by the perpendicular height. Now remember, look for that right angle. It's the distance between the two parallel sides. In this case it's 8. Now once you've done that, you're going to halve it. So 14 plus 20 on my calculator gives me 34. I'm going to multiply that by 8. That gives me 272. And then I'm going to divide that by 2. That gives me 136 kilometers squared. Now if you don't like that formula, let's do it with the two triangles. So what I'm going to do is from one corner to the other, really doesn't matter which way you go, okay, I'm going to make it into two triangles. Oh, so this triangle here, this is my base, right? This is my height. So I'm going to go base 14 times height of 8 over 2. If I do that on my calculator, I get 14 times 8 divided by 2 gives me 56. Alright, different colour pen. Let's try a green. Now let's do this triangle here. Here's my base. It's 20. Here's my height. Because if I moved that and I put it here, that would be the height of that triangle, wouldn't it? So this one here is 20 times 8 over 2. Let's do that. 20 times 8 equals, divided by 2 equals, I get 80. Now to find my final answer, I have to add those two together. 80 plus 56 gives me 136. So if you're not too sure about the formula yet, you'll do it again next year in year 8, but you can do it either by splitting it up into two triangles or doing it that way. Now for those of you who are ready, I'm going to pop off now because it's getting pretty late. Can you try these? Alright, and I'm going to hopefully do a video for those tomorrow. So try those and getting ready for our next lesson on either Tuesday or Wednesday. Okay, bye you 7.